Please welcome to the stage Bret Perkins, Senior Vice President of External and Government Affairs, Comcast Corporation, in conversation with Ann Caprara, Chief of Staff to Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, and Marek Gootman, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution, along with Kathy Hollinger, CEO of Greater Washington Partnership.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Almost. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So I'm very lucky today. We have a great panel. You've heard lots of great things this afternoon, and we're gonna keep crescendoing to the end of the day. But you have folks who are visiting, but they're coming home. So I'm joined on stage, and I'll do a second. You heard their titles, a second of introduction. These are all former Philadelphians, so you can't fake it with them.
We're still Philadelphians.
What's that?
We're still Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well said. Although if I say go Birds, what do you do?
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Kathy was careful. So great to be with all of you today. This is one of my favorite days of the year because we get to put together a series of discussions and panels and fill a room with folks who are about solutions. And I'm joined by doers on the stage today. So this next conversation is going to be focused on the key to Philly's growth, regionalism. And you'll hear a little bit about this, but Philadelphia is the only major metro in the country that doesn't have a regional economic development plan. For all of you who live in and around the region, probably no surprise to this. But there's a lot that we can learn from. And we're going to learn from our colleagues that are here on the stage today. So I'm going to keep the intros literally like a sentence or two because we've got a lot to cover in a short period of time. And suffice it to say, all three of these panelists are very, very accomplished, major pages of background. But first, to my immediate left, you heard it, Ann Caprara. She serves as the Chief of Staff to Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Also his campaign manager. She was a former Chief of Staff to two members of Congress before. Immediately next to her is Marek Gootman, who's the non-resident senior fellow at Brookings. Most importantly for this conversation, he's the person who will bridge think tank world to real world action, focused on cities and metropolitan areas, both in the US and globally. And then to my further left is Kathy Hollinger. She's the CEO for the Greater Washington Partnership, which unites leading employers across Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C. To collaborate on economic growth in that area. Kathy is a former colleague back when I think I had hair on my head. So why don't we start with a little bit of framing, Marek? Maybe I'll turn to you first, and you can give a little bit of framing for the conversation. Tell us about your work with metros around the country, and why is this an important conversation for the Philly Metro?
Well, thank you. I'm actually originally from Havertown, and everybody can give their street cred here. So I think I actually want to build on the earlier panel with Michael and Kathy, where Michael mentioned the Chetty analysis that came out recently around economic mobility for the city, but also for the region. We work with city regions, cross-sector collaboratives of private, public, and civic actors around the country trying to solve problems. And for roughly the past 10 years, that problem has been the combination of competitiveness and inclusion. So when Michael mentioned Chetty's work about the lack of economic mobility, ranking 50 out of 50 major metro areas, I want to break that down a little bit and connect that to the issue around what Philadelphia is grappling with, the region is grappling with, and opportunity. The analysis actually showed at a more granular level that for the past roughly 15 years, the black residents of the city and the region have had not any significant improvement in terms of economic mobility. It actually showed, not just in the city, but in the suburbs, that economic opportunity and mobility for the white population has somewhat declined, okay? So there's still a big difference between black and white economic mobility as a general proposition, but there is a fundamental lack of quality jobs and opportunity in this region. And it's really important also to recognize that the boundary of the economy does not end at 69th Street. It keeps going, and we're all built on assets that we share, this labor force and firms that work with each other, or common concentrations of strengths and so on. So the key here is that it's about access, but really there's not enough quality job creation happening. And we see that in other analytics for the region, that our productivity in particular areas is on the way up, but our job creation is stagnant in those strengths. And that as a whole, compared to our peers, our peer regions, we're not performing well on the fundamentals of the economy, which we think are our strengths, like life sciences. We're okay, but not fantastic. We're not outperforming what we expect to happen based upon our assets and our concentration, or what is benchmarked against other places. And I'll just say how that relates to some of the conversation you're going to hear about action from Greater Washington area and the relationship between the state and regions, both of which are active here because of the Shapiro administration's new economic strategy and how it focuses on sectors and regions. There are two fundamental problems. And I was here like 7 or 8 years ago talking at a Business Journal event about global identity and how Philadelphia is perceived, the region is perceived, and it's like Rocky and cheesesteak still. But the issue was like, how do we project ourselves more effectively and all the great stuff we've got going on here? And my answer was, well, it's not really about how you project yourself. It's like, we don't have the structures or the strategy to execute. We do not have, there are strategies that our different organizations have. We do not have a common, really focused agenda on which all of the economic contributors and workforce contributors can say, this is our area of strength, and we're all invested in it. And we're not just invested in it on a 3-year philanthropic cycle, we're invested in it in a 15-year effort that then can actually build and yield results, and we're committed to these things. That does not exist in this region. And second, we're underinvested in the ability to execute on it. So there are actually a number of great ideas that have emerged here. There's been a lot of, over the years, a lot of conversations about where we should focus and so on. We do not have a regional capability with enough staff and money behind it to deliver on any of those good ideas. And I can go into detail on comparing this region with others, but there's a strategy question that can be solved. And there's a structural problem that needs commitment, particularly from the business sector.
Great, thank you for the framing. Very good framing. And so let's dive into some examples, because I think as we joked before when we did our prep call for a half an hour session, it went an hour. We probably could have gone 3 hours. But one of the things that's really clear is you can do it, but it's a lot of effort and work, and it takes folks who are committed every single day to make it happen. So, Kathy, let me start with you, and maybe you could talk about, I mean, the partnership works across 2 states and the District of Columbia, so you have a lot of things you could do. Can you talk a little bit about how you bring focus to the effort?
Yeah. So love being home. I will call Philadelphia my home, but I'm Villanova, so I know that doesn't fully count. But I will say this. So the Greater Washington Partnership is an organization that emerged from a realization similar to what Marek was saying, which is we are a region, Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C., from Baltimore to Richmond, so that corridor is vast, where there are incredible assets, but we are not leveraging those assets, and we are not well coordinated, knowing how people work, move, and live throughout a region. We have incredible vibrancy in terms of leading employers who, just within that corridor and just at our table, they support 620,000 direct and indirect jobs. And they felt that at the time they were not formed, which they were formed in 2016 as the Greater Washington Partnership, they were born out of a rallying effort, actually 2 things. One was when 3 CEOs came together to try to put a lot of energy and momentum into the Olympic bid in 2014. That was one. How do we pull the region together to think about being a viable option to really drive transformative growth and impact? And the second was actually a lot of the work that the Brookings Institute did with their Global Cities initiatives. We had a few, one in particular who was our founder, C-suite executive from JP Morgan Chase, who with Brookings moved around this country to see what are the regions that are positioned to thrive and where do they need to focus their efforts. When Bret mentioned where we focus our work, we are absolutely unique for a few reasons. One is that we are 90% CEOs at the table of leading employers. Number two, we do not count on any public sector money or dollars for funding, which requires huge commitment. And the initiatives that we are focused on, they transcend political cycles and they have to transcend jurisdictions in our region. But we do not try to boil the ocean. Our issues are tied to what will propel us forward to be competitive globally and what will hold us back if we don't get it together. And that is skills and talent. How are we developing the most versatile, highly skilled workforce in the region and hopefully keep them in the region? The second is how are we thinking about regional mobility and transportation to get people to move around the region in a seamless, equitable, accessible way? And the third is how are we thinking about inclusive growth as we grow a region? So a lot of what you talk about, Marek, is absolutely what we are focused on and thinking about. How do we remain competitive? Yes, nationally, but globally, knowing we have fantastic assets that are under-leveraged and they require massive commitment and coordination with public sector, private sector, and creating the right table to be committed to drive the long-term priorities forward, because it takes years. I think I answered that question in terms of not boiling the ocean.
I appreciate that. And so one of the things that we were really interested in is Intersect Illinois. And can you talk, I mean, you have a governor, similar to our governor, that is very hands-on, that cares a lot about this, thoughtful about economic development across his state. So can you talk a little bit about the approach, why this is important, Intersect is important to the governor?
Sure. I'm also from here. I grew up in Radnor. I'm wearing my Giants and Commanders colors today in honor of Saquon Barkley. I have one agreement with the governor of Illinois, and it's that I never talk about sports when Philly teams are playing Chicago teams. So, you know, I guess I would start by saying I can bring a little bit of hope to this conversation, because when my boss took office, I ran his campaign in 2018. When he came into office, we had 4 years of a governor who not only didn't invest in economic development, he actively went out and bad-mouthed the state of Illinois, encouraged CEOs not to come. Don't ask me why, but that was his mentality. The state had been without a budget for 2 years. Our credit rating was really in the tank. And my boss came in and said, okay, before we can do anything around economic development, we have to stabilize the ship. So since he came into office, we passed 6 balanced budgets. We've had 9 credit rating upgrades. We've really turned the perception of the way state government is run in Illinois around. We also took advantage of something that I think is actually very unique to Chicago. I've worked all over the country on campaigns with politicians. I've never seen anything quite like it that we have in Chicago, which is this civic community of CEOs and businesses that get together on a very regular basis, decide to invest in the civic culture of the city and the state, and in projects that benefit both. So we saw that and said, we have this huge asset here, which is, you know, CEOs of companies like Walgreens and McDonald's and United, who want to see the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois succeed. And in some cases, just really need to be put to work to do that. So we got into office in 2019, we kind of righted the fiscal ship, and then we were like, great, now it's time to get into economic development. And then March of 2020 hit, and we had a pandemic, right? And all of a sudden, we're facing these enormous issues about how people are working, whether companies are going to have to downsize, what the size of state government is going to look like. And as we worked through that, I think it also gave us a chance to actually see the playing field anew. My boss is a very unique governor. He was in business for a long time before he became governor of Illinois. He has relationships with CEOs and companies that are a little bit different than your typical politician, and he cares a great deal about economic development. And so one of the things we did, and focusing on what some of these other folks were saying, we started to focus on very particular sectors. One of them is quantum. I was a poli-sci major in college, and so don't ask me to explain quantum computing, but J.B. Pritzker understands quantum computing. And really, very early in his term, went to the state and said, we need to put an investment into the idea that we can attract quantum companies over the next 5 to 6 years to Illinois, that we can make this a hub in the country for quantum computing and for the future of the businesses that are going to grow up around this industry. We also decided with the CHIPS Act and other things that the Biden administration was doing around bringing manufacturing back to the United States, that we were going to look at electric vehicle manufacturing, battery manufacturing, and how do we get those companies to come to Illinois and to locate there. So what does that look like now? We grew up Intersect Illinois, which is our public-private partnership, which does get money from the state and which we do support. We built up our Department of Economic Opportunity, really the government bureaucrats, if you will, who work with companies to help them get licensed and registered and into the state. But really, the most important thing, we centered this in the governor's office. My boss, every single day, gets a rundown on the companies looking to come to Illinois, where they are in the process, who needs a touch, who needs a call. He calls the CEOs himself. We do trade missions abroad. We just got back from Japan, where we go meet with companies who may not have a project right now, but we are trying to build relationships with them for the future. And we pound on that day in, day out. We have a white glove service out of the governor's office. If you are a company looking to come to Illinois, we are going to hold your hand from the moment that you contact us to the moment that you locate in the state. And that includes everything from your permitting to, at times, we have passed legislation in our state legislature to help certain industries come to Illinois. The EV manufacturing business is one great example of where we literally went to the state legislature and said, we need to come up with some incentives in order to help spur growth in the state. And it's a grind. I'm not gonna pretend like this isn't hard work, it is. We hired really, really great people. And we go down to the granular level. We know every site in the state where you can locate a battery production facility because they need vast acreage, they need access to energy, railroads, transportation, and we house that information literally out of our office and work every day with those companies who are trying to come to the state to do business.
Maybe both and you and Kathy said something about the CEOs and your private sector leaders, and maybe if I could ask you to expand a little bit on the important role for C-suite. When we were talking before, when you both made it clear that if you really want to do this, you've got to get the C-suite engaged. So maybe, Kathy, you can start, and then Ann, add in a little more of your experience with that.
Yeah, kudos to the governor for making that commitment to really cultivate investment, but also bring people to the state. So the importance, I would say, is twofold. I think that if you are thinking in terms of what you want to build versus what we currently have in place right now, which is, almost 10 years in, but the importance of the CEO or C-suite is that there is a commitment to invest in where they are and where their people are. There is that civic commitment to make it the best place for us, best place to live, work, learn, and build a business. The capacity that they have as companies or organizations to be able to lend services to a very challenging issue, whatever that may be, in collaboration with private sector, makes them incredibly invaluable, whether it's themselves as a CEO or whether it's their teams to offer resource and support. I would also say that when you have the CEO of an organization, regardless of private sector, nonprofit, for us, we also have university presidents throughout that corridor. They're making the decisions at the table. And there is the ability to be able to act quicker with much more passion and certitude to drive something forward, because it takes time. Private sector, it takes a little less time, but it still takes a lot of time. And then I would say, in terms of where we were at its inception, the reason it was so important to have the CEO and C-suite as you're building is because there needed to be that we don't just need the resources. We need to know that you are in this for the long haul. If you want this organization, for us, it was the Greater Washington Partnership, to be different and additive to a Chamber of Commerce or a Board of Trade or other private-public type organizations, there has to be the commitment that the work that needs to be done is long-term and not everything, and that the resources that are being provided are coupled with the presence of the CEO at the CEO level in how we are driving something forward. So for us, that was very important as we were building the organization. It's what remains incredibly important as we think about transcending political cycles and thinking about the work that is ahead.
I think this starts with, our Intersect Illinois, which is, again, is our public-private partnership. We really emphasize that we want the membership to be at the CEO level, that those are the folks we want around the table, that when you join, that's what we're asking for. And in return, those folks have access to my boss on a regular basis. He attends meetings. He comes in to talk to them about what's going on at the state, at the national level. And then I think it extends beyond. It drives me a little bit crazy because my boss is like, we change his phone number every 2 years, and then somehow within 6 months, everybody has the phone number. He likes to talk to people. It is one of his great assets, and I love him for it. But and that really extends to these CEOs, and you can't imagine the impact it has when we have a company that maybe they're looking at 2 states, and one state has the governor calling them over and over again, saying, we want you here. What's your latest issue? Is there a problem with your permitting? Is there something going on with the site selection that's a problem? And Governor Pritzker really does that on a regular basis. He also does something very unique that I think has had an impact on a couple of the businesses that have decided to come to Illinois. He will call up the CEO and say, what clients are you trying to land? What businesses are you trying to? I will make the call to that potential client to tell them they should go do business with you. And he's done that many a time. And again, it pays itself back in spades, because these companies, when they come, they overwhelmingly tell us it's that personal touch. It's that idea that they get a chance to talk to the governor, to interact with the governor, and that they know he's committed to them being able to thrive in the state. And we have Illinois is a very interesting state. It is the most reflective of the nation if you look at the demographics of Illinois. In much the same way that Pennsylvania, you've got, Philadelphia, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh. We have the Chicago region, which drives a lot of the economic development in the state, but it's a very large state with an agricultural sector. We have Rivian, which located itself in Bloomington Normal, and that, by the way, has spurred a ton of growth around that central part of Illinois. And we pay a lot of attention to all the pieces of that: housing, education, you mentioned university presidents. We put those folks at the table. Our quantum initiative, it was the governor who got Northwestern University, the University of Chicago, the University of Illinois. You can imagine putting the presidents of those universities in a room and saying, you all have to work together on this. And every 2 months, we're going to check in and see how it's going. We're going to bid for federal projects together. We're going to go and meet with Sci Quantum, is a business that just decided to locate in our quantum park. They got to sit down with all of those people together, and it was the governor ushering those folks at the room saying, we're all going to work together to get this done. And that doesn't happen naturally. I mean, we'd all like it to happen naturally, but you really do have to have somebody who's driving it.
That's a great segue. Marek, I want to ask you a question, and then listening to that, you're doing work with Pew and partners locally here, working to remove us from the list as the only major city in the country that doesn't have a regional economic development plan. And maybe you could give some observations about that work, and then I think I'd also like to hear from Ann and Kathy as we get to the wrap after that on what are things that we ought to know that will be really difficult that we just have to work our way through.
Somebody told me earlier today that this is filter-free Friday, so I'm going to be blunt. First of all, I want to put in a plug for the Greater Washington Partnership, what was described as more process and engagement versus delivery. And what success of Greater Washington Partnership has been, it's not just CEOs getting together and chatting with each other, but there have been very specific, you go to their website, very specific initiatives that emerged from both quantitative and qualitative analysis about how to be more competitive, and not just be more competitive, but create more quality jobs and access to them. So you'll see the delivery of stuff versus a strategy. There's a strategy, there are tactics, and there are tasks about who's assigned to what, which is what we're trying to get to with this region, based upon real analysis about our strengths and real analysis about the untapped potential here. And then for Intersect in Illinois, the thing about the governor's action is really alignment behind an opportunity that was identified jointly with the private sector and actors in greater Chicagoland about quantum, and a choice that was made of how to align the state's assets and power and resources behind something that there was agreement around in the region. They have a unique competitive position vis-a-vis other places around the country and internationally. So two things that can be directly adapted into this region and with this state. Right now, we've been going around off of an effort that was initiated by Pew and other leaders, civic, governmental, and business in the region, that said we have to do better. All the indicators that I said, that's just, that's action forcing. And we helped to go around throughout the region in southeastern Pennsylvania, recognizing that the region is bigger in terms of its economic footprint, but to talk to the economic development and workforce development contributors, not just in the city of Philadelphia, but Chester and Delaware County and Montgomery County and Bucks County, about what it is we can find common ground. Because right now, the way that the economic system works in this region is hyper-fragmented, and it's also super heavy on the public sector. Most of the economic development activity in this region, except for in Chester, which has a private-public partnership, is being delivered by local governments for local action. And there's not private sector dollars that provides you the flexibility to be more strategic and long-term. So there's just like a structural challenge here. I also mentioned the other structural challenge, which is the amount of investment. You compare this region to a similarly sized place of Phoenix, greater Phoenix. There are other factors in play. It's a new high-growth city versus an older industrial city with a different industry mix to start with. But they started with tourists and people moving there to get away from the cold. Same size. They also don't have headquarters in Phoenix. And yet, over a 15-year time frame, figuring out where they want to invest and leveraging Arizona State University and so on, so very specifically emphasizing their assets around connected place, which is like microelectronics, semiconductors. They stuck with it, and now where is in partnership with their state, where is a lot of investment land? You have TSMC there, you got Intel there, you got Samsung there, growing their presence because they stuck with a strategy of workforce and economic activity that was really clearly focused on what their strengths were gonna be, and they invested jointly over a long period of time, and now they're bearing fruit. You can go around the country and identify similar things. So in this region, we're focused on two elements. One is what functionally we do together, because as I said in Phoenix, they have 19 people at the regional level, not the local level. City of Phoenix has its activities, which are critical to delivery, it's the same way the city of Philadelphia does. And Mesa, Arizona, which is a city of 500,000 people, believe it or not, right next door, competing against Phoenix for local economic development activity, has their people. At the regional scale of Phoenix, there are 19 people working on business in sector-led economic development, international engagement, and FDI, and research and promotion. 19 FTE. At the regional scale, in greater Philadelphia, depending upon the day, you got 4. Okay? That is not going to deliver what this region needs. So it's this combination of making those choices that we're going through in analytics and getting everybody to agree on something that's really going to be a now and next that's eatable or chewable, right? That can't bite off everything. We're going to focus on this. And then we need everybody to come along and commit to investing in this. Doesn't mean you can't do your independent stuff, but there's got to be a couple of very specific sector-led things focused on quality jobs, not just job counts. So that's what we're going to deliver, and I got to do it because I still got family here.
We're going to wrap, and I want to give a chance both for Ann and for Kathy. One of the themes that I hear all the time, and just listening to this, which I mentioned earlier, is it's hard work. But you run into all kinds of roadblocks in the work, and maybe just to prepare everyone as we embark on trying to do this, are there typical roadblocks that you experience that we just need to know it's there and you have to work through it?
Well, there are always roadblocks. There's, local officials who are not as bought in as you are. There are government bureaucrats who are not moving the paperwork along as fast as you want to. There are, in the case of Chicago, a very unfair reputation for being, a city that's not safe. I've lived there for 7 years. I'm telling you, it's a very safe, wonderful place to live. I think one of the most important things, though, in getting around those roadblocks, the thing we hear over and over and over and over and over from companies is workforce. They need workers. They need educated workers. They need dedicated workers. They need people that are going to show up and do the jobs. Sometimes we make this too hard for ourselves. You've got to think about it as, where do people want to live? If you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s, what kind of a community do you want? What kind of a place do you want? What do you want your home costs to be? What do you want your summers and winters and falls to look like? So yes, we focus on all the business development piece, but we also focus a lot on making Illinois a very livable place. Our cost of living is much lower than in some of the bigger cities on the coast. We pay attention to the quality of the air and the water and the parks and all of those things. We pay attention to the quality of our education, and we work hard both with the community college system and making sure that that is supporting the businesses that are coming in, as well as with our higher education, typical universities as well. And I'll say this, I'm not trying to get too political, although it's been real hard the last 2 weeks. You've got to think not just for the now, but 5, 10, 15 years out. Illinois has a huge supply of fresh water. If we are looking at massive climate change, which I think we are over the next 20 years, we live in a place in the country that is not as affected by that as Texas, Florida, Mississippi, Arizona. We think about the kinds of families that want to live and breathe and be free in Illinois. We make sure that we're not shutting down maternity wards, that we're not chasing LGBTQ kids out of school, that if you get to be who you want to be and live in Illinois, and I will tell you, we hear more often, especially from our international companies, how important that is to them. So I know the election we just had, but what I'm telling you, when it comes to the day-to-day living, breathing, your life, what matters to people, we pay a great deal of attention to it. It's not just about what's politically right or left, but about, if you're a young person and you want to move somewhere and you want to build your career somewhere, what does your community like? How does it support you? And how do we make sure that that continues to be something that not just for the immediate future, but for 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we are winning on? And we know we're doing that, so.
I'm going to get the hook, but you got the last word.
Wow, okay. So I'll just go right to the barriers. As I think about barriers every day, barriers, you have barriers on the public sector, public official side, and you have barriers on the private sector, other business organization side. And I'll just give two, rather than focus on the negative of the barriers, ways in which to really consider how to approach that. Whenever anyone is considering creating something new, and you probably see this all around the country, those who are doing the work every day feel slighted. And I think that it's so important to lean in with, for us, other business organizations that are doing the work every single day to say, listen, this is what you do remarkably well. We are trying to be additive and do this one thing so that when you're fighting the fight to preserve the integrity of the business community, we're actually giving you data and insights and information that can help you fight that fight, because we're not fighting that fight. On the public official side, that's so important in our market. It's so important to make sure that you lift people as you work through what you want to create, because they have to feel validated to be able to support this bigger ecosystem of a broader regional footprint of whatever you are creating. On the public official side, in our very wonderfully complicated region that we work in, I will say that identifying and being so clear about the priorities that they all have in a region and identify the one issue that speaks to that collective priority. So we were talking about skills and workforce. Skills, workforce, creating a dynamic workforce, and transportation are the two that are issues for us that we can talk about with every single public official, because it is baked into their priority of how to grow a city, a state, a broader footprint to ensure that that region can be competitive on a global stage.
I think you can all appreciate why our prep session went so long. So please, put your hands together and thank our panelists for being here.